Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to Stormworks. We are once again working on our Awacs. Now, in the last episode, we started working on shaping out some of the cockpit, so we are going to continue doing that today, and we're going to try to make some pretty good progress on the cockpit today. So, if you guys are kind of interested in that, definitely stick around, stay tuned. Now, this episode, I will say, is going to be a lot of in and out of the workbench, so I do apologize about that, but since we are kind of playing around with pivots and trying to angle all of these panels correctly, it kind of takes a lot of that because I am kind of going to be testing out how they look and how they fit together and all that kind of good stuff. And then we're going to go from there. So if you guys didn't see the last episode, we kind of got that front panel in place and we had to do some funny business with the windows. You can see the front windows aren't attached anymore, so they slide back to actually save some clearance. But right now I am going to actually work on a pivot system for the seats. So the seats are going to move and this is going to change a little bit as we build. You guys will kind of see, but I'm doing this so each seat can have more than one role. So the pilot on the left here is going to be just the pilot. That's the only role he's going to have. But the co-pilot on the right seat is going to be the boom operator and the fuel operator. So that is kind of why I want these seats to fold. Also, if they fold and kind of slide forward and whatnot, it gives us a lot more clearance in the cockpit. So one thing I'm trying to do with this cockpit is I want to make it a little bit larger. We have a larger plane. We have enough space for it, but I don't want to cram it with a bunch of different control seats. So that's kind of the goal with this. We're going to stick them on some sliding rails. They're going to turn around and then slide forward and lock in place. So with a lot of the things in the cockpit, I'm going to try to make everything lock in place so they don't fidget around too much. And that is just kind of something that Stormworks has an issue with if you aren't super familiar with the game. These physics bodies kind of bounce around a lot, especially when you're going high speeds in like an aircraft or something like that. But we are getting right into the build with this one. So if you guys like the series, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. We've got plenty more to do on this plane, and you guys will see it's going to start coming along a lot faster. I've got a lot of Lua and screens to do, but I'm not going to do that on camera. I said that a couple episodes ago. I didn't really record a lot of the Lua, so a couple of you have mentioned that you wouldn't mind seeing that in the future. If I continue doing a lot of Lua work in the future, I'll kind of try to record some of it. What I will say is I'm not necessarily the best at it, so I might be able to teach you guys some of the basics, but definitely not a professional. And I actually had quite a bit of help from quite a few people in our Discord with the Lua on this one. So thank you, Jack, and thank you, Bird. And if you guys are new to the channel and haven't seen, there's a link down below to our Discord. Check it out. It's a great place to kind of hang out, make some friends, and learn about Stormworks. There's a lot of really, really good builders in the community. So generally, I try to keep my Discord pretty friendly. I know that's kind of something that some Discords kind of lack, unfortunately. But if you're new to the game and you got some questions, definitely it's a great place to learn. And there's a lot of people in the community that will gladly help you and take the time to try to explain some stuff to you. But enough of that. I'm going to get into the time lapse. I'm going to let us get some building done, and then we will come back and talk in a second. Before I do that, you guys can see I have our seats kind of pivoting here. Now this is a lot of in and out. I actually have to move these pivots over a block because you can see they're not on center. So that was just an oopsie I made. But generally speaking, that's how they're going to work. Is they're going to be facing rearward towards the cockpit, and then they're going to spin 180 degrees and move forward. Now the one on the right that's doing the refueling, he's going to turn 90 degrees to the right, and there's going to be a bunch of controls on the right side wall of the cockpit that he can also use for the refueling booms and the drogues and whatnot. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. Let me get some blocks down and we will come back and talk in a few minutes. All right, well, we'll just get everything hooked up to electric. And that was enough in and out of the workbench for a lifetime, so I do apologize for that, guys. But it's just a lot of kind of guess and check with that kind of stuff. There's some better ways to do it, but that's how I do it. I just try to kind of feel it out and see how it feels, and go back to my microcontroller and make a bunch of tweaks. Now, I did make some mistakes in the microcontrollers, and I also left them in the video, so you guys can kind of see what I was doing. But really the goal here in this episode is I'm going to try to get a lot of the basic controls into the cockpit, and we'll worry about the more complex stuff later on in another episode. But I also am trying to kind of build this cockpit in a way where you're not getting bombarded with buttons and switches, and that's super cool. And don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of that, but at the same time, it makes the plane very hard for you guys to use. And that's something that I don't like. So I'm trying to make this as easy to use as possible. And with that is trying to, reduce the amount of switches and buttons and all that kind of good stuff. So right now we are working on the overhead panel. So generally in cockpits, there's a panel above your head, and that has to do with a lot of times it has to do with like the power distribution, the fuel distribution, some indicators for the passengers, that kind of thing, the APU. Now we're not going to get into any of that, like I said. So it's going to be really simple. We're going to add a couple of switches for our navigation lights and our formation lights, all that kind of good stuff, which we haven't done that yet. So those aren't going to go in quite in this episode, but there's also going to be switches for the engine power. So that's another thing that I'm going to add up there. In this episode, you guys will see that. Now, I will change it up a little bit later. So I'm going to have it just one key to turn on the entire airplane. So one key, throttle up, the engine should fire up, the computer screen should turn on, all of that other good stuff. So you guys don't really have to go through a super long startup procedure, but for the meantime, I'm just trying to make a panel that kind of looks good in here, and I think we actually do a really, really good job with this one. So I'm just going to kind of curve out the rest of this cockpit in here so we don't have all of these hard block edges, and I think that, this is going to actually look quite similar to like a real cockpit, at least shape-wise when we're done, which is pretty nice. And you guys can see it's quite big in there. You can stand up, and there's not a lot going on, and I plan on keeping it that way. I want it to be kind of spacious and feel like it's not very kind of crowded or cumbersome to be in there. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm trying to bring this physics body down below. So this is a little cheeky kind of part of Stormworks. What we're doing is this block that I'm dragging all the way down into the ground is a separate physics body that we're going to put on a sliding rail. So adding to more physics bodies in this cockpit, but it's kind of a necessary evil if you want it to look nice, that, or you got to go the XML route. But XML also, it doesn't work a lot of times when you're doing this kind of thing because you still need to have the blocks themselves there. And you can't really XML, a lot of like the instrument panels and switches and that kind of thing. So I'm just working on trying to make that look pretty smooth and that it's kind of meant to be there. And part of that is I need to bring this kind of sloped panel, and I need to slide it forward. You guys can see there's a gap there. So that's the gap that I'm kind of trying to close with those sliding tracks. And it's kind of weird how we do this, but essentially I'm going to bring it back a block so we can put buttons there, and then it'll slide forward, but it'll look like this right here in this video or in that clip. So you guys can see it. It's pretty smooth. It kind of lines up pretty well. I was, again, pretty happy with how that ended up looking. And this is, once again, like everything else, going to get locked into place with a hard point, so it hopefully doesn't bounce around too much. But right now I am going to kind of give ourselves a block gap there, and then that way we can fit our switches and keys in. And you guys can see we have to slide this forward another block in order for it to kind of mesh well with the rest of the overhead panel. All right, well, we did a little bit of off-roading in the airplane, and that did not work out, so good thing it flies, kind of. But right now we're moving on to a little bit of detail on the overhead panel. Now, I know I'm spending a lot of time in these paint blocks, and this is something you guys know you'd normally see in or on camera, but I am very, we'll say, OCD about some of the painting and the lighting and that kind of stuff. And I will say that this color scheme that you guys see is going to change, even though I spent this long on it. But these are basically just some simple gauges to show how high in the RPS the engines are. Now, there's going to be a lot of other instruments in the cockpit that will kind of give you that information as well. But, you know, I thought it was kind of useful to have it up there, especially because, you know, I wanted to basically have that key itself be the entire startup for the airplane. So in the battle of trying to not give you guys a lot of switches in the cockpit, I still want to detail it up quite a bit, and I think a lot of indicators and that kind of thing is a good way to do that. So right now I am going to go over the bar segments. If you guys haven't seen that, I'll kind of show you how to do those. So I set them to on off. That's a really important thing to do. And basically what they're going to do is they're going to take 8 different bools. So you just read your bool, you start on the channel that they were in, and I like to set these obviously far apart where they don't interfere with each other. So you saw I just changed that from 4 to 12, and that gives us a 8 block gap in the Booleans. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to hook a bunch of different thresholds up into the different bar segments, and those are, each one of those little light segments is corresponding to one bool. So the engine RPS runs to, I believe, about 40. I could be wrong. I might have changed it. This was a little bit ago. So, but essentially what I'm going to do is this first one I put into a blinker because it's the red one that indicates that the RPS is too low to function. So, and then the next ones, we are just going to go up from, you know, the values. So this is going to be our highest one, so 40 to 99, and so anytime it's over 40 to 99 RPS, that last one will blink, and we're just going to bring this down ever so slightly so you guys can see. I'm just going to bring these values down by about 5, and it's nice divisible number. If we're doing 40 RPS, there's 8 bools, so you just reduce it by 5 and that'll get you to 0. And I know the bottom one doesn't really count, but we don't really need to know if our RPS is between 0 and 5 or 0 and 10 because that's so low it's not functioning. So I just kind of spread them out. That's how you're going to do your bar segments. It's not too complicated. I know a lot of people kind of have questions on how to do that. And what I would recommend you do is just, like I said, switch it to the on off and use the 8 separate bools. The other way of doing it, which I believe is bits, is going to be a lot more complicated for you to do. And that's probably when you go to do this, a lot of the trouble that you have with these kind of things. So another silly, annoying thing is you need to add an on signal for the backlight for those, which I think is a little goofy. They shouldn't require 2 inputs to be on, but we're just going to test this out real quick. And I know the one isn't working, but I just want to make sure that these scale up correctly and you guys can see it looks like it's working correctly. And that's all I want. So I just want a quick little visual indicator that, you know, the RPS is high enough for you guys to fly, or, you know, at least if it's not high enough for you to fly, you guys can kind of get a reference as to where it is in the power band. So all of those switches up front are not hooked up to anything. I just put them there because they're probably going to be anything. Now I removed the 2 on, or 1 on each end, so it's only going to be 4 in the middle. And I did that on purpose because I don't think we're going to need that many switches. And again, I'm trying to reduce the amount of switches you guys have. So we're going to add a little bit of paint block detailing here. I think it'll kind of look nice. But I will say, back to those switches, the 4 switches in the front are just going to be for lights. So they're going to be landing lights, navigation lights, formation lights, and then a cockpit overhead light. And that will be more so for when you're flying at night. And we'll kind of try to fill a lot of this panel out more later, but for the meantime, I just wanted to kind of add a little bit of, again, detailing to the paint blocks and whatnot. This is just another way I can kind of fill this panel out without giving you guys button overload. So we're going to actually change this to green. I know I do a lot of red, but lately I've been doing a lot of green in the instruments and whatnot, and I really like it. So that's kind of that. We're not going to think about this too hard. It's really just a fake little panel that's going to turn on when you turn the key above on, which is basically the master switch to turn everything on in the aircraft. But that is about all the building we got for today's episode. So I know this was kind of a weird one, kind of tedious. We were in and out of the workbench a lot, but you know, it's kind of necessary, especially when you're doing these fine details in the cockpit and whatnot. But if you guys made it to the end, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You guys have been absolutely killing it lately, so I can't thank you enough. But that's all I got for you guys today. If you haven't yet, check out the link below to our Discord, and these videos will keep coming. I promise you we'll get this on the workshop. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.